Herzlich willkommen bei der Global We Media. Heute haben wir unseren Gast Valery. Möchtest du dich vorstellen?
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Valery Viban, and I live in Berlin. I work as a consultant for dealing with colonial issues. This means the broad issues around decolonization, the broad issues around building networks of resistance and dealing with this very difficult history between Germany, first as a European country, and her former colonies in Africa. In this case, I mean all the countries that were colonized by Germany after the Berlin Colonial Conference. So you think about the Namibia, which was by then was called Deutsch Südafrika. I think about Cameroon, I think about Togo, I think about Tanzania, which was called Deutsch Ostafrika.
Ich danke dir dafür, dass du dich vorgestellt hast. Ich stelle dir nun einige Fragen. Warum ist die Dekolonisierung für uns heute wichtig?
Danke, gute Frage, sehr gute Frage. Dekolonisierung ist erstmal wichtig, weil es ist ein Weg zum Gerechtigkeit. Because we are currently living in a world that has begun asking a lot of questions about lots of injustices from a historic context, from the past and everything. A very famous African writer, Chinua Achebe, has said, until lions would be able to have someone who can write their history, they would always be a victim of the hunt. And so for a long time, because Africans did not write history, the story of European colonialism of Africa has always been told in a very, very not so fair way. And that is why works of decolonization are now important, because first of all, it's empowering Africans to come out and speak about their rights and talk about resistance and reclaim their position in global history and change this narrative of what injustices colonization did to us. So the process of decolonization involves retelling our stories, reclaiming African identities, and looking for ways to reconcile history, reconcile the two continents or the human race and things like that.
In einigen Interviews haben einige Leute gesagt, dass die Dekolonisierung nichts bringt. Was denkst du dazu?
I do understand people who think like that because it's a very complicated term in itself and a very complicated word. But let's break it again a little. What is decolonization, first of all? Decolonization means getting the whole system that furthered, that fostered, that nurtured and built colonization, rupturing this system, stopping it from working, and starting all over where we can be able to see each other as equals, where we can be able to not have white superiority and the other races under and struggling, where we can be able to not exist in the inequalities that we have around the world that have been fostered by this colonial system. So when you think at this global way, then people have doubts if this is ever really going to be possible. Is it possible to decolonize and things like that? But if you would break it down to the initiatives, to look at how things are changing since this question of decolonization came up, how people are now fighting, how communities are rising up in resilience to make demands, to make small efforts, and the little things that are changing, this is enough motivation for us to go ahead. I can like to use an example here. For instance, this year we have had, in Congo, we have had Belgium apologizing for their role in the killing of Patrice Lumumba. This is another good example of telling you that things can change even though they are very slow. We have had the Germans apologizing for their role in the Namibian genocide. They have not yet done much in that regard, but just the fact that they can reach a level where they can boldly state that they acknowledge their role in this means that things are slowly changing. We've had the French apologizing for their role in the Rwandan genocide. So things are slow, but things change. Also, we have, with the restitution question coming up now and then, with this year we are talking about the return of the Benin bronzes, we're talking about the return of artifacts like Ngonso. This is just to show you that what? Even if it's difficult to rip apart that system that empowers colonialism, decolonization can achieve little by little until when it will become a mass movement, then big things would change. So big things can change, but they only begin through small steps. I remember when I was in secondary school, there used to be the phrase which used to say, if you cannot do small things, if you cannot do big things, do small things in big ways. So every step is a step towards something, and it's always a very good thing to encourage people to say, okay, decolonization is difficult. It's difficult to rip the system. It's difficult to stand against the system. But there are lots of little success stories here and there which are encouragements that if we keep going on, we'll reach a level where we would have built enough community resilience, enough movements, enough energy to rip the colonial systems and restart new. Because ripping colonial systems is not also just for black people, it's also for white people, because all of us are growing up in colonial systems, and then we begin to foster something called colonial continuities, which is the way that the colonial ways that we're brought up to think, thinking that the white ways are better, thinking that the white race is superior and things like that. Those are the aspects of colonialism that we need to work on. So yes, decolonization is possible. It can have impact on the communities.
Okay. Und wie steigt man in diese Arbeit ein in der Kolonialisierung?
How do we come into the decolonial questions? How do communities come in? How do young people come in? That's a very important question. Like I said, building community resilience is very important. Community engagement is very important. First things first, as young people, for instance, at Global We, you have spent the last 2 weeks working on this project. This is already something. Because while on the political side, things have to be done, young people like you, like Vanessa, like Marie, like all the other people who are working with the Global We team have to be doing their part. What you're doing here is sensitization. It's education, which means you need to educate yourself, and then you're aware, and then you know what to do. The next thing is that you're now forming a decolonial movement here in the project. That is something. And the movement can only, with sensitization, you can only get more and more people. And the more and more people come in, the more strong our voices happen. And then from there, we can make stronger demands to politics, we can make stronger demands to politicians, and that is how change begins. So educating ourselves, then moving to the next action stage, which is building community, sensitizing community, mounting pressure on governments and things like that. While these are going on, it's also important to involve in other aspects that highlight the stories of oppressed, colonized people in the past. For instance, we have the whole movement around Berlin, decolonizing the city of Berlin. We have those strong movements that are working to reinstate the images or the memories of colonialism, like the recent thing with moving from Mohrenstrasse to Anton Wilhelm Amo-Strasse. The whole thing with kicking out the colonial regiments that are being engraved in the Afrikanische Viertel in Wedding. I'm thinking about the streets like Karl-Peter-Strasse, I'm thinking about streets like Luderitz-Strasse, Schwarzkopf-Mondstrasse in Wedding. Like just the idea of trying to get those renamed or recommented so that the history of the colonial people is re-empowered. These are all community initiatives that we as communities can engage in. We're also thinking about our resilience to things like migration. You know, how to rebuild ourselves, build our skills to be able to stand and fight for the rights of oppressed people, formerly colonized people, because in a way we are still all victims of colonialism.
Okay, ich danke dir, dass du meine Fragen beantwortet hast. Denkst du, ist es noch möglich, dass Lehrer die Schülern aufklären könnten über die Kolonialisierung?
It is very important. The next phase is bringing decolonization to the classroom. The classroom in itself needs to be decolonized. So it's not just about putting it in the syllabus, but even decolonizing the way that the classroom is taught. I remember when I have come to Germany, one of the first things that happened was that a German kid in a secondary school I went to, they were asking me if I was from England. Why? Because for them, it was strange for them that someone from Africa was speaking English. They thought that, in Germany, I've also had that question being asked to me by young people. Was spricht man in Afrika? Afrikanisch? Was spricht man in Cameroon? Cameroonisch? Why is it like this? Because the school classrooms were not teaching them about histories. And so in this classroom experience in a school that was in Neukölln, I was able to explain to them that the first thing is, I speak English and I'm from Cameroon, and Cameroon is in Africa, but now why do I speak English? Then we get to start discussing the whole thing about the colonial history of it. How Cameroon was a colony of Germany and later of England and France, and that's why I speak English today. And then this can lead us to a more fairer direction, which is what? Talking about decolonization. Decolonizing the classroom also means the children beginning to empower themselves to interpret knowledge in their ways, not necessarily in the ways that the system has given them before, you know. So all these things are very, very important. And just the fact that now we begin to think about talking about colonialism in the classroom means that things are changing. This means in the next phase, we're going to maybe come to where we're able to talk about decolonization. And it's really, really important for the classroom to be decolonized, because we must not think in the ways of the old, fascist, annoying, colonizing white people who were in the past. We must also know that times have changed. It's time for justice. The classroom should be more tilted towards empowering young people to be advocates of justice, advocates of social equity, and things like that. So it's important to take decolonization to the classroom through classroom action projects, having decolonization, decolonial clubs in school, rethinking the way that things are managed in the classroom. Also in the young people forums and things like that. Everything can be decolonization. You can even decolonize the kitchen, It's only in Germany that they try to force the idea on every child that breakfast is bread. You eat bread at breakfast. This is a very European idea. Yeah. And then many young people, even African young people, begin thinking that if you don't have bread and tea for breakfast, then you have not had breakfast. So we need to decolonize our breakfast tables and also know that even young children eating beans in the morning in Nigeria, or eating hummus in the Middle East at breakfast, that is still breakfast. Breakfast is not anything mixed with bread and eggs like they have in Europe. No. So every decolonization can be attributed in every aspect of our life. You talk about the politics of hair. You see, you're proudly wearing your African hair, natural as it is, very beautiful. But some years ago, it was not like this. Because of colonialism, African people were taught that African hair is rough, it is difficult to manage, it is ugly and everything. And so you were trying to put the product, the perm, to make it straight and pony like the European hair. But because of decolonizing hair, the decolonizing hair politics, you begin to believe that wearing your Afro hair is also beautiful. So decolonization is a movement that you can apply to anything in your life, rethinking the way you see everything. Instead of traveling to the exotic places and making nice pictures for Instagram and everything, you also want to rather travel to reconnect with your roots, reconnect with histories that are particular to you. So self-empowerment, everything can be decolonized.